This is Ari from the Music Factory, and I'm here with the fourth installment of the interview series, and we're here with Kimo Muraki. And Kimo's an amazing multi-instrumentalist musician from the Seattle area, born in Hawaii. And I'm really looking forward to talking to Kimo. He's one of my favorite musicians in Seattle by far, and he's done teaching and is currently doing some teaching for the Music Factory. And so how you doing?
Doing great. I'm actually supposed to be in Hawaii right now as we speak, but of course that trip got canceled, so here we are.
And what part of Hawaii are we talking about?
I'm from Oahu originally.
Yeah.
Honolulu's the big city there. Everybody knows Honolulu. So
amazing. You were born in Hawaii. How many years did you live before you left the island?
So I was there until I was about 8 years old, and then we moved to Idaho, of all places.
Yeah, Idaho.
And and so my half of my family remained in Hawaii. So even after we moved to Idaho, I went back to Hawaii every year as a kid growing up. So I'm partly from Hawaii and partly from Idaho. I feel rooted in both places, you know. And I think a lot of my musical tastes and upbringing and stuff is a mix of both of those cultures for sure.
Sweet, man. So yeah, when you're until 8 years old, did you have any musical exposure?
I did, yeah. My father and my mother and my grandfather were all musicians in Hawaii. In fact, my grandfather played in the famous Hawaiian singer Don Ho, his band, as an ukulele player.
That's incredible.
Yeah, it's pretty amazing. He played. He had house bands all throughout the islands, and so he played in his house band at all the big hotels and stuff. And
amazing.
Yeah, in fact, the ukulele that I play currently and teach lessons with is one of the ukuleles that my grandfather played. Prized instrument.
Who makes that ukulele? Is it
Kamaka. Kamaka ukuleles, yeah.
Sort of a very authentic Hawaiian-made, old-school ukulele, like a real deal.
Yeah, yep, it's the real deal, yeah.
Oh, that's amazing. Yeah, because I mean, I hear you play, and I know that you just have that music in your blood, like you just have it internalized, you know. And I think when I first heard you play, it didn't even sort of register to me, oh, he's actually from Hawaii. He grew up with this music. I just thought, oh, Kimo's just spent a lot of time really studying the style, you know, but this is really like a music that's like in your blood from a young age. Did you see your grandfather play when you were young?
I did, yeah. In fact, I have so many memories of my granddad and his friends coming home after their gigs to unwind and party, I guess it would be said, and they just have big jam sessions. I remember it very distinctly as a kid. Yeah, it's pretty cool memories. So
it's sort of like you had, because I have a theory that if you're a young kid and you're around music like that, you absorb it on a level that, you know, someone who's not around it, it's a different level of absorption, you know. It's harder to absorb it later in life. But a lot of times, you know, some of the most amazing musicians just had music around their house at such a young age. And I think that you probably saw something happening there, like a communication or a spirit that probably, you know, and like you said, you have all these fond memories. It probably really sparked your interest in pursuing music.
Yeah, absolutely did. I think I just wanted to be a singer from as young as I can remember. That was my favorite thing to do. So, yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
And you said your parents also played?
They were. My parents were really hot in the wedding circuit. So I have lots of memories as a kid going to weddings, and my parents would get hired to sing duets at weddings all over the place. And In fact, when we moved from Hawaii to Idaho, my father's family is in Hawaii. My mother's family is in Idaho. We moved to be closer to my mother's family. And my grandmother on my mother's side was a career musician as well. And she was also a music teacher her entire life. And so she was also a music minister. So she was, she, played for the church and did all the weddings and stuff. So when I was a teenager, I took over the reins of being the wedding singer. My grandmother and I,
and this is now Idaho at this point. If you're a teenager, this is now Idaho.
And this is in Idaho. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So both sides of my family had a lot of music growing up. And,
did your family members sort of like give you lessons? Did they sort of like sit you down and say, here's some basic chords, or, sing this song with me? I mean, what was that sort of like, that relationship sort of like? Like, I'm interested to know like where people picked up music,
Yeah. There was never any formal training in my family. It was all just everyone getting together and singing and playing songs, and and I didn't really, in fact, I unfortunately as a teenager where I grew up, the music lesson thing didn't really exist. We moved to a really small, tiny little country town in Idaho, and there weren't really music programs to speak of. And so even though I was still around a lot of music, the whole idea of music education and training and private lessons and stuff, I didn't have that opportunity until I went to school. Went off to college, and that's when I started, taking private lessons from different teachers and things, which blew my world wide open.
Sure.
So
when did you get your first instrument?
I was playing like little toy saxophones when I had all kinds of little plastic saxophones, recorders basically. So as early as I can remember, but I was tearing up that recorder in 4th grade. Doesn't everybody still does that, right? I tell you what.
I think a lot of people, I got a recorder when I was really young, but it didn't take with me. It was exciting. It was fun. We learned a few songs, but I wouldn't say I was tearing it up. You probably had some Holy Spirit in you.
Oh man, I love that thing. I actually have, when I was in my first year of college, I joined a Baroque recorder ensemble, and so I have 5 different recorders, different sizes and things. A recorder is an amazing instrument. So I've got love for the recorder for sure. But after the recorder, my first real instrument, I suppose, not to say the recorder is not a real instrument, it's a real instrument, but my first major instrument was a saxophone. I started playing that in 5th grade.
Tell me the progression of what instruments you started singing, and then which instruments all the way up until, like, just give me a big list of all the instruments you play and when they came in your life.
Okay. Yeah. So started playing, I've been singing for a long time. That's just what we did on both sides of our family. And then I picked up the saxophone. When I was in high school, I started playing the trombone. But I started playing trombone on the valve trombone, and then moved to the slide trombone. But because I started playing on the valve trombone, I was also able to pick up the trumpet. And so, by high school, I was playing the saxophone and the trumpet and the trombone.
Yeah. Uke at that point as well.
And uke, yeah. I always forget about the uke just because it's kind of always been there. So it's always been around. So yeah, the uke there. And then just before I was wrapping up high school, I started playing the clarinet and the flute because I knew I was going to go to college and to be involved in the ensembles there. That was wind instruments or the reed players, they encourage you to know your way around all those instruments, right? So went to college. I started playing the guitar when I was a teenager as well. So went to college, and I didn't start really playing the piano until my first year of college. And I got involved in a recorder ensemble. That became a real instrument for me. I, by the time I was in college, I already kind of was dabbling in several different brass and reed instruments, and I kind of found that the mechanics of reed instruments and valve instruments, you kind of learn how relative they are with each other, right?
Okay. I'm not sure I understand what you're saying. How
well, so the fingerings on a saxophone, when you learn to play a saxophone, and then you pick up a flute, you begin to realize that many of the fingerings and the patterns are the same. So mechanically speaking, it's like riding a moped versus a motorcycle. Different beasts, but they still require the same sense of balance and that, if that makes sense. By the time I was in my second year of college, I began to be kind of a pack rat, and I developed this knack for just keeping my eye open for instruments that people didn't want. Mm-hmm. And I literally would just take instruments that people didn't want, and it didn't matter if I played them or not. I just wanted them. And so I was packing around all kinds of crazy stuff, we may or may not want to edit this part out, but I dropped out of college after 2 years to follow the Grateful Dead. And then
I think that's awesome.
And then, but that was in 1995. And so sadly enough, I missed, I got to see that last leg of shows during that last, from 94 to 95. And then when I made the decision that I wanted to take a break and go and do this thing that I had just discovered, that counterculture, I found myself out of school, and the Grateful Dead stopped touring when Jerry died. And then, my whole world changed. It was during that time, so this is a couple years out of into college. It was during that time when I started playing the banjo quite a bit. And I actually, what's that?
I said, I was going to ask.
Yeah. Well, while I had left college and I went back to Idaho to spend a little bit of time to work and make some money so I could follow the Grateful Dead, I was in a music store in Idaho, in this little town called Eagle, Idaho. And I was just walking around, and I heard someone playing a banjo in the music store. And I was just, man, it sounded amazing. I wasn't playing it at that time. I looked around the store and I found the practice room where it was coming from. And there was a 12-year-old little guy, a little 12-year-old guy, just absolutely tearing it up on the banjo, unlike anything I'd ever heard. Right. And so I bought a $250 banjo from that music store. There.
What was the store called?
I think it was Greif's Music.
Greif?
Yeah.
Mr. Greif?
What's that?
Mr. Greif, probably.
Yeah. I actually had a Mr. Greif, not associated with that name, but anyway, so I bought the banjo, and I convinced this kid to give me lessons.
Oh, yeah. 12-year-old.
12 years old. His name is Noah Jeffries. Sorry?
Still playing around, or?
It's funny because I several years ago I looked up his name because I was curious, because I hadn't thought about him in a while. Yeah. And I saw that he was kind of a big time session guy in Austin, Texas. Wow. But yeah, he was from a family of musicians that did nothing but play bluegrass and gospel music. And everyone in the family played. All the kids were homeschooled. And Noah he didn't even consider himself to be a banjo player. He was a fiddler, and he was this junior fiddle champion all over the place. So he's just an amazing kid. But yeah, so that my first banjo lessons was from a 12-year-old. That was my introduction. I went from, in college, I went from taking my very first music lessons, studying with a saxophone teacher and studying with an opera teacher. From that to studying with a 12-year-old homeschooled banjo player in Idaho.
So you did have quite a few private lessons at one point in your life.
Sorry?
You did have some private instructors at one point in your life.
I did, yeah. I didn't have any private instructors until I went to college. And that's when I first had my first teachers. Sorry?
Where did you go to college?
So I went to Clackamas Community College in Oregon City, Oregon. And then from there I went to Lewis and Clark, which is also in Portland as well.
I'm curious, like, when you pick up a new instrument, I mean, it sounds like you've been doing it for so long, you probably don't even consciously know how you approach it, so to speak. But are you like sort of thinking about it like analytically? Are you like thinking like, okay, I'm gonna learn my C major scale and my D flat major scale and my G major scale? Or are you kind of like feeling your way around song by song? I'm kind of curious to know, like, how do you approach playing all these instruments, which you do well? How did you get there?
Boy, that is that's a really good question, and it's hard to pinpoint any one process with any one instrument, because some of them require a different approach, right? So, like for instance, I think my most recent love are like digging into analog keyboards and synthesizers, and modular synthesizers, where you're plugging in different patches and finding different sounds and things, and that's definitely much more of a there's much more of a science to that than it would be picking up a string instrument and trying to figure out where all of the whole steps and half steps are falling into place.
Mm-hmm.
But I would say in general, for the most part, when I pick something up, at first I'm not thinking analytically as much as I am trying to feel what's happening with it,
Right away.
Yeah. I'm kind of like a kid, I'm like a puppy, messing around with a new stuffed animal for the first time, just kind of playing and feeling a little bit, So, and then of course, once kind of start to feel what something is about, then we got to do the dirty work, and I have to go back and research it a little bit and figure out what's going on.
Sort of like an analogy for someone that wants to play multiple instruments, and take your cues, right? It's sort of like you're a puppy, you're playing around, but you're peeing on the floor every once in a while, but you're kind of going like the other side of yourself. It's kind of like, it's okay. You didn't know that you shouldn't pee there. Like you don't like puppy because it peed there. You just go, no, just don't next time.
Totally. Yeah.
Well, I'm not supposed to pee here. I made this mistake a few times, so you just kind of correct it a little bit more. Is that accurate?
There you go. Yeah. Not supposed to pee here, but man, I feel so much better now. So, yeah.
So you still have that same feeling when you pick up a new instrument. You still approach it that way.
I tell you what, it is a crazy, endless. It's like, because I know from walking into the very room that you're in right now, the world of music and all of the tools available are like it is an endless rabbit hole of just noise making beautiful things that you can pick up and do things with, and there's just no end to it. It's like, like now with technology and all of the, things that we can do electronically, and we open up a music program and hook up a MIDI keyboard, and we've got thousands and thousands of sounds to work with, and each sound gives you a different idea. And it's just, it's almost, it can be, I think, maddening to really sit back and just realize that there really are endless possibilities, you know?
Let's talk Marmalade for a second.
Yeah.
You know, so I'm assuming some people who hear these interviews are going to know you, and they're going to love hearing some things they haven't heard before. And there's going to be plenty of people that hear these that have never heard of you before or haven't, you know, don't know you. So it's great to kind of cover all this stuff. But Marmalade is a group that, you know, I remember when I first moved back to Seattle, seeing the beginnings of Marmalade. And it started in one club, and it did like 4 years in that club, and then it went to another club, and, you know, 4 years there, and it kind of moved around, but it's been going every Thursday, I believe, always Thursdays the whole time.
Yep.
How many years?
Since 2002.
So we're talking 18-year weekly gig. I mean, I just, for 1 second, if anyone's at home and doesn't know Marmalade, just imagine a weekly gig that runs for 18 years. So what happens in 18 years of a weekly gig? Like what evolutions have you seen, and, you know, what instruments do you usually play when you do Marmalade? And I mean, I know that you're not always doing it anymore, you know, and I can imagine that's sort of part of an artist's evolution. You can just drop in anytime you want now, sort of as a VIP, but no doubt you were there and a part of it, you know, from the beginning. So what is that, you know, what does that mean to you?
Yeah, boy, it's really crazy to think about because, you know, in 2002, I was just kind of beginning my Seattle experience. You know, I'd only been here for a couple of years on and off. And so the whole Marmalade family, I have known most of them since even before they had families, and now everybody's got families. And some of those, there's a couple of those kids that are old enough to play in Marmalade now that came from Marmalade families. So it really is like having a family. And I think Marmalade is exactly what I needed when, to rewind just a little bit, I am this kid who went to college and then followed the dead and then lost that experience and had to run around trying to figure out what to do next. And Marmalade kind of is really what I needed at that time. When I first started playing in Marmalade, I was playing the saxophone. And that has now transitioned to, I think that I play the talk box in Marmalade now. It's like I play the guitar, but I don't feel like a guitar player. I feel like I'm doing the talk box. It's really strange. And I'm singing a lot in Marmalade. We've been through a lot in that band, and that I would say that there's probably about 15 people who have been a very consistent rotating part of the Marmalade family. Mm-hmm. And many of us in Marmalade switch roles. You know, if one person isn't there, there's often another person in the same band that can kind of switch roles and take that role. And this is the big thing about Marmalade. It's that Marmalade is always improvised. We have never walked into a Thursday night with a plan in 18 years. It has never happened. Sure, we've got lots of little hooks and melodies and things that have reappeared over the years and have changed over the years and take their own life for a little while, and that's for sure. But walk into Marmalade and anything can happen. It could be a total train wreck. It could be a blissful, beautiful experience. Yeah. And it is really, it's really special. There's nothing else like it that I know of that I've ever been to or at least that's lasted this long, you know. Sadly, this is the first time since 2002 during this shutdown that Marmalade. Wow. Yeah. So Marmalade's official first break in 18 years has started in March of 2020.
Oh,
You know, one of the things, especially in a gig where the rule of thumb is that you don't know what's going to happen,
yeah.
is that it's very easy to become self-conscious. And, you know, there's been tons and tons of times when playing on stage with Marmalade, I've felt like things have completely fallen apart. And then I've snapped out of it and looked around and seen, you know, Bob on the bass and Davey on the drums just going for it. And then I'll snap out of it and realize, actually, wait a minute. No, I'm just in my head here,
Yeah.
you know? And so, yeah, it's a really interesting, it's so easy to get into your own bubble. And then at the same time,
Right. Because you don't want to be thinking like that.
yeah, it's the thinking part, right? Yeah, that's a really interesting thing. Yeah, it's the self-conscious part. It's like, you know, when you go and do a gig and you get really critical of yourself for not playing it as you've expected, and then everybody tells you how great it was.
Yeah.
And I have a problem with not believing it.
Yes.
Being like, oh, you're just saying it, you know. But I do the same when I see artists play, my peers, and I think it's just amazing and blowing my mind. And then I'm reminded, I'm like, oh, you know what? They might not think that, you know?
Yeah.
So
Funny enough, as it turns out, like Hendrix didn't think he was doing a good job. You know, you listen to some interviews and like, then it's like John Coltrane, you know, was not satisfied with the way he sounded, you know?
Yeah.
And I've heard interviews with Garcia where he says, you know, funny enough, like I'll think I'm on fire a certain show, you know, and I'll just think I have the world in my hand. I'll go back and listen to the tape, and that wasn't a very good performance in my mind. And he says, other nights I think I played the worst I've ever played. The whole time I was in my head thinking I sounded terrible, and I go back and listen to the tape, and I'm like, that was brilliant, you know? You know, there's a bit of a magic trick there, you know? It's almost as if like I said, the same thing I was saying before. It's like there's a bit of a magic trick there. It's almost like your intellectual being isn't necessarily completely in tune with reality in a way, you know, and that's sort of like probably a basic psychological known fact, you know. But yeah, it's great, man. Yeah. Marmalade.
Yeah.
You know, one thing that comes to mind is that I've been listening to like a bunch of these kind of Deepak Chopra type people, you know, it's just a good time for self-reflection and trying to improve yourself. You know, we're in a cocoon of sorts, and it's a good time to sort of really take into account, like you said, what really matters and think about where you really want to go, and you know, sort of how to make the best of the situation. And when you say like people are saying thank you, I mean, it makes me think of this thing Deepak Chopra was saying, which is that emotion is more contagious than a virus. And what he means by that is that we can transfer emotion now. People have been saying this for centuries, right? This is like some evolutionary kind of thing, but we can now transfer emotion through walls, across cities, across states, across continents. And someone who's on the other side, like they can kind of know that this is happening right now. This is for me, this is right now. It's a different thing than like, you know, watching an old video. There's something about that. This is happening. We're sharing this moment together. And the fact that you can do that intercontinentally, I mean, in a way, it's almost like as humans we're, without realizing it, developing some sort of echolocation level communication, you know, which was always there. You know, you go to a Dead show and you got that, you know, you get that energy exchange. But, you know, the fact that we can transfer knowledge and emotion over airwaves, you know, it's kind of unbelievable. And there is something, I think, yeah, we should be able to come out of this with an extra sort of skill and hands.
Yeah, absolutely. Amen.
Yeah. Nice. Well, Cheers, man. Well, go your garden. Cheers, man. Well,
Totally, I will. I'll send you a picture.
cool. Send it.
All right, man. Take care, Ari.
Yep.
Good to see you.
Bye.